So this week is tricky. I need to get all of those pulled down to lower shelves so I can use my tripod, because if I try to film up there, my shoulder's gonna need surgery.
Good morning. Welcome to the Sunday Shelfie. Today we are on week 7 of 9 of my young adult and middle grade collection. If you're new to this series, I have almost completed a showcase of my entire collection in here, including a bunch of adult speculative fiction, and I will link the full playlist in the description below. But for now, let's go look at some young adult books. Starting off this week, I have the few remaining books in the Journals of Ben Polly theme. This one actually came out, I think, at least a decade later than the other ones. I think the author suffered a couple of personal tragedies, and so took a while to get back to her writing. But I'm really grateful for the promise of these two books. Got Something to Do with Dragons here, and then an underwater adventure, both of which are the adventures I've been most excited to go on in this world. So can't wait. Absolutely love this series. One of the strongest middle grade ones I've ever read, and highly recommend those. The Hero's Guide to Saving the Kingdom by Christopher Healy. I got this one as an ARC, and it looked really cute. It came out around the same time as the first How to Train Your Dragon, and I got very similar vibes to that one, kind of like this cheeky story with a lot of fun elements, so hung on to that one. Slayers by C.J. Hill. I think this is an author that came in and did a book signing. And it might be self-published. I've never heard of Squarefish. But there are very few young adult books that have anything to do with dragons. So I snatched that one up because I thought it was right up my alley, but frankly forgot that I had that, so it obviously has not been a huge priority. I have books 2, 3, and 4 in the Tiger's Curse series by Colleen Hoek. And I really want to read these. They're such beautiful books. But I was just okay with the first one. It didn't knock my socks off. I really liked the cultural immersion and the overall atmosphere of the first book. But I thought it suffered from poor pacing, in my opinion. It was drawn out way too much and focused way too much on the mundane. When you have this exciting premise, I think it could have hopped along a lot better. But the books are so beautiful that I feel like that's the only reason I'm really compelled to keep them and keep reading eventually. And series have a tendency of getting stronger as they go, sometimes. Perhaps not in the YA genre, but things have happened. I have an arc of Splintered by A.G. Howard. It's a retelling of Alice in Wonderland. And I love the covers for this series. I think they are so striking. I opened this up and tried to read it several years ago and think I got bored with it. I think I ended up jumping to the end to see how it ended, and I retained none of it, so that's why it's in my unread section. So maybe it was a mood thing. Maybe I just wasn't in the mood at the time. Or maybe just the idea of the cover and everything dazzled me, but the actual text isn't that great. But it sold quite a few copies, and people kept coming in for the sequels, so it's got to be better than that. But yeah, I don't remember a very positive experience with that one. This is a recent acquisition, this series. I've got Prey by Tom Isbell. It gives me Maze Runner vibes, but with the added element of them being hunted. I was intrigued by these because I love a good sense of competition and people using skills to survive, so I thought it would be a good combination of both. I haven't seen any reviews for these, and really in this case I probably would still read it anyway. There are a few books where I just don't care if everybody hated it. I like the idea enough that I want to try it for myself. That's one of them. And then after years of being tempted on Book Outlet, I finally picked up The Gilded Cage because of how many positive reviews I kept seeing for it by Vic James. And actually, now that I'm looking at it, it's the same size as a young adult, which is why I have it over here. But it's published by Del Rey. They usually do adult stuff, and a lot of the adult hardcovers are showing up in this smaller format, so this is one of the few where I'm not sure where it goes. I always default to publisher's preference because they're marketing to a very specific audience, and I feel like it's a cut and dry way to decide whether or not it's YA or fantasy, or rather adult fantasy. And I know people have so many different ways of determining the difference, but that's what I go off of, and so I think that one might be misshelved. We shall see. I have books 2 and 3 in a set for the Crestomancy Quartet. I have a compilation in my red section of books 1 through 4, and I thought that was all that was available. So to find out that the story continues is pretty cool. The trouble is it's been about 10 years since I read it, so I'd have to go back. Well, it's probably been 20 years at this point, but I'd have to go back and reread. But when I do, eventually, if I do, I want to be able to continue the series. This one looks super cute. I have signed copies. Oh, there goes the bookmark. The Ghost and the Goth by Stacey Cade. Essentially, he's haunted by a cheerleader. And I think the premise of it is so cute. And they're pretty short little books here. I'd probably read them all as in one go. Consider this one book and kind of binge through them. Meeting the author, I thought she was really charming, really clever, so hopefully a lot of that translates to her writing. Catalyst by Lydia King. This is the second in the duology of the Control series. It's where, like, through medical practice, they've figured out how to alter these teenagers, but with the added benefit of the author being a medical practitioner. So a lot of the medical stuff actually makes sense, like theoretically. I wasn't connected to the characters upon the first book, and even though I have the second one, I have not felt compelled to pick it up anytime soon. Okay, Lauren Kate has so many books out. I thought the blue cover of this one, Teardrop, was really pretty, and it was an arc, so I brought it home. I don't really know much about the author and all the books she writes, other than they're really popular, which that right there might either mean that they're really, really good or that they're really, really overhyped. It's hard to tell. But I can't help but get the impression that I am not quite the target audience for those series, but I do love the covers. And an arc of Aurora Rising by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. I feel like I've read Amy Kaufman before, but I have yet to read anything by Jay Kristoff. Especially now with all the stuff that he's writing, he's kind of more on my radar than he used to be. But that one, I'm hoping it'll be good. I think a duo of writers is usually a lot stronger than one, but sometimes they get off into these weird tangents and no one's willing to be in charge to bring the story back into focus, like on track. Interested in that one, but not feeling super rushed to pick it up. There's a theme here. Maybe I should stop saying that. I'm not feeling rushed to pick up a lot of these, so when I am, I will let you know. Just a cute little chicklet book that I brought home, The Dating Diaries by Kemp. I don't know anything about that. And then Bridget Kemmerer has, I tell you what, a huge fan base. I've got a signed copy here. Met the author at an event. And like, people who love this author, like, really love this author. It made me give her a second look when I hadn't planned on it. The Origin by Jessica Corey. The tagline says, "The jungle hides a girl who cannot die." So right there, I'm hoping we have some really good world building. That's a big driving point for me. And it seems to me that it would quite possibly have a plot unlike anything I've read in any young adult series to date. So that's why that one's intriguing to me. Then we have S.J. Kincaid. It looks like Insignia is the first book. I got these on bargain, and I was able to find the whole trilogy, so I picked them up, but I have absolutely no idea what they're about. I believe they are somewhat post-apocalyptic. I mean, Catalyst. The Diabolic by S.J. Kincaid, same author. This book has been on my radar for quite a while. It's one of those I saw often enough that I thought, okay, I'll pick it up and give it a try eventually. Also looks like a dystopic series. And then I think this series was being sold quite regularly before YA became a hugely popular genre. But the book Epic by Connor Caustic, it could be one of those virtual reality stories if I'm remembering right, but don't quote me on that. But I love these little Firebird paperbacks. Like, they are so satisfying to read. And then I loved Alienated by Melissa Landers, so I picked up Starflight, thinking this is like a match made in heaven for me. I love sci-fi YA. And I started reading this one and did not enjoy it. Like, I think I was more reading it because I felt like I should be, not because I was actually in the mood for it. And it was really cute. I made it about 10 chapters in, but then put it down and never went back to it. And this is one that I feel like I've been saving for a rainy day because I feel like I'm going to really like it. But it's got a lot of good components to it. But as of yet, have not made any progress. Mystic City by Theo Lawrence. I think I won this in a giveaway. And then Innocent Darkness by Susan Lazier. I have a signed copy here. I did not meet this author. This was she either came into the bookstore and signed everything, or we got them that way. But I mean, it's a steampunk looking young adult, which is kind of off the beaten path. I like that. The Time Quartet by Madeline Langle. This is where A Wrinkle in Time came from. A teacher read it to the class when I was in the 4th grade, and I didn't retain anything from it, but I thought it was interesting. Maybe a little weird for my taste at the time. For some reason, I felt compelled to pick up a science fiction book club edition, the compilation of the whole series, maybe out of nostalgia. I remember it being kind of mind-bendy, but then again, I was 10 when it was read to me, so who knows. It's definitely a classic, though. The Seven Wonders series, Colossus Rises by Peter Legranges. This is in the same vein as Percy Jackson. I don't know if it's necessarily mythology driven, but it's marketed to appeal to the same type of reader. David Leviathan, Every Day. This guy is one of the more popular contemporary young adult writers. And this one is one of those like reoccurring day stories where I think it's like kind of like Groundhog Day, but instead of reappearing as himself, he comes back as someone else every day. But I just think the idea is cool. I don't normally read stuff like this, which is why I have this, because every now and then something different is exactly what I'm craving. And so I find a lot of weird, interesting things that way. And then I've got a couple of short stories in the Pendragon series. And I really wish I'd known these existed while I was reading the main series, because I would have read them, like supplemented them in between bigger novels so that there's a sense of continuity. But I don't see myself going back and reading these just by themselves just to add more to the story. Mostly because I don't care about the conflict anymore. I know how it ends. But if my son and I ever go and read the series, then yeah, we'll definitely pick those up. But I love the author. I love his creativity. Whoop, losing swag. Met him at a book signing. I love his world building. I think he's such a cool writer. And so he's got this series, which is post-apocalyptic. And of all of the post-apocalyptic ones I have still sitting unread, this one's higher on the list for sure. And then something called The Light by this author, Morpheus Road. It looks kind of creepy, so maybe he tried his hand at horror. And I got an arc of that one and just picked it up solely because of author recognition. An arc of Shatter Me by Tahereh Mafi. I love the idea for this story. That's why I still have the book on my shelves, even though countless feedback saying that it wasn't a very good series, wasn't written very well, focused way too much on the love story and not enough on all the other cool elements. But I can't quite bring myself to let that one go yet. So I picked this one up during employee appreciation when I was just buying all the young adult books that looked even remotely appealing. Eyes Like Stars by Lisa Manchev. And it's got little fairies on the cover, so you know, world building. I thought it looked pretty cool. And then Melissa Marr, if nothing else, I appreciate this author for the atmosphere she creates in books. She is such like a magical writer in that sense. I did not appreciate the trajectory of the Wicked Lovely trilogy, but the start is one of the strongest that I've ever read. And Carnival of Souls, I don't believe it's an extensive series. It might even be a standalone. But I thought, take that great writing and combine it with a really concise, overall, arcing story, plot, whatever. And this is probably going to be really good. And then I have this little compilation of short stories that I bought for $3. And I picked it up for Melissa Marr. And I love Scott Westerfeld. He did the Ugly series. So him taking on a love story, I'm interested in. Okay, so I've got books 2 and 3 here of the Novice series by Tahereh Matharu. I read the first book as an ARC, and it was one of the most awkward reviews I've ever written. It questioned the writing skills of the author, which is not something I normally do, but the very specific things that he did just really bothered me. And so I wrote a really unprofessional review. This was like 15 years ago. And I've regretted it ever since because I feel like that's the reason why Disney Publishing does not approve my requests anymore. I got myself blacklisted, and it wasn't even that harsh of a review, but I could see how the author would have taken it personal. And in hindsight, I'm more professional than that. I really needed to rephrase how I said a lot of that stuff. But anyway, I picked these up on bargain because I thought, well, you know, maybe I was just feeling grouchy at that time. Maybe I'll like the series more. A couple of buddies in my buddy read group read it and really loved it. People who like the same adult sci-fi fantasy stuff that I do. So I thought, all right, I'll give it another go. I haven't gotten around with it yet, though. Still have some weird feelings over it. And then Robin McKinley. This is a retelling. Spindle's End. Probably a Sleeping Beauty retelling, if I were to guess. But I've hung on to it because she's such a beloved author. This is a random arc I picked up, The Eternal Ones, What If Love Refused to Die by Kristen Miller. So I hate it when books have a really cool concept, but then the whole story focuses on the love story aspect. If I were to pick this one up, I would pick it up for the love story, and everything else is secondary because that's kind of how it's marketed to me. And I'm okay with that. I would be probably more tolerant of everything focused on a love story if I knew that that's what I was getting going into it. Very specific here. And then The Mask of Shadows by Lindsay Miller. It screams of an element of competition to me, and I am incredibly drawn to this cover. I think it is so pretty. So if I were to like randomly go to my shelves and pick something up, this would be a candidate. The Avatar Battle by Chad Morris. Got a signed copy here. And then The Impossible Race by the same author. These are books 2 and 3 in the Inventor's Secret, I think. Awesome middle grade books. I'm not sure why I haven't made time to continue. I thought they were so cool. It's a school for kid inventors. They're pretty cool. Very delightful. Met him while he was touring with Brandon Mull. And I would like to make time to go back and finish the series. It's a Shadow Mountain publication, and I absolutely love everything they do. Books 2, 3, and 4, not 5 for some reason, in the Five Kingdoms series. Probably because I kept buying them, but then realized I didn't really want to read them. Something about the plot's just not appealing to me as an adult. Unlike the Fablehaven series, which I absolutely love. But yeah, I think they're gorgeous, and I love the author, but I think I have officially abandoned that series, and maybe I'm just hanging on to them for when my son's old enough. Or my daughter. She's got a lot longer to go. Princess Ben by Catherine Gilbert Murdoch. Another one of those random young adult series I picked up during employee appreciation when everything was a lot cheaper. I know nothing about that. So a couple weeks ago, I showed a book that I had read as a kid called The Boys Start the War, and then there's a companion book, The Girls Get Even. These are more novels in that same series with all the same characters. And I snagged them because I liked the other books, but I can't see myself making time to go back and reread those. Okay, The False Prince by Jennifer Nielsen. It's hard to see, but I've got a signed copy here. This is a trilogy that people talk really positively about. I don't know much about it, but I really like the way they look on the shelves. It's giving me more like Arthurian lore, but I'm not positive on that. By the way, author signings really do help bring in new readers because I probably wouldn't have picked that series up otherwise, and that's true to a lot of the stuff that I have signed on here. The Abortion Trilogy by Garth. I tried to read the first book, Sabriel, and the story was interesting. I liked the main character, but something about the writing was so dry that I got bored and put it down. And I thought that was a really weird thing to do given how many cool things were going on in the story, how wildly rich and interesting the world building was. But this is not the first time I've had a struggle with Garth Nix's work. I tried to read the Seven Tower series in high school, books 1 through 3, and didn't retain any of it. So something about this person's writing and I just do not click. And while I really want to have read this series, I made it about halfway through the first one before putting it down for other things. And that was back before I consciously DNF'd things. Like, I think I just set it down in favor of something else and then never went back. And never felt bad about not going back. But to that end, he wrote one of the spirit animal books initiated by Brandon Mull. So hopefully I'll like that one a lot more. The Unraveling by Elizabeth Norris. I don't know what it is about this book, but I really want to read it. It doesn't stand out in any other way, like it seems like just one more slightly dystopic young adult novel. But I am drawn to it. And I'm not sure, it's not the cover. Just one of those weird things. I have books 2 and 3 in the Delirium series by Lauren Oliver. I read the first book when it was an arc, and then reread it once the other 2 books had been released because I had planned on continuing, but then still never went on and read. And I really liked the first book. I thought it stood really strongly as a standalone, and I've been burned a lot with the next 2 books in series not being as good. So I think I'm sitting satisfied, even though I love Lauren Oliver's writing. I think she is such a lovely writer, so evoking. So I'm not ruling out continuing altogether, but just haven't felt compelled. And then finally, I have the Jenny Nimmo Midnight for Charlie Bone series. I love these hardcovers. Like, they are just so readable. Really fun format to experience this. This is a random middle grade series, and I liked the format of the covers so much that when Employee Appreciation hit, I didn't just buy one, I bought them all. And why would they change the spine for the last book? I hate that. I look at myself now and I'm like, I'm never going to read those. What was I thinking? I just thought they were cool and they were inexpensive because I was getting discounts. So I bought the whole thing and now I'm deeply regretting my life decisions. But they are pretty. And who knows, maybe my son and I will get into them at some point. They do look really, like the wide spacing of the words do make them really accessible. So when he gets a little more confident with reading, I mean, if we like them, we've got the whole thing to go through. But that's the problem. I bought them blind. I have no idea if I'm going to like them or not. I mean, usually I go in with a little bit more knowledge on what type of series it is, or like customer feedback, or do some research. But in this case, nope, just bought them because they're pretty. And that does it for this week's tour. I forgot to talk about these. I left these up on the top shelf. I have them because I find the spines really cheerful. They are cheap little chick-lit books that were serial released for a display that we had every month. And they sold a few here and there, and I've actually read about 2 or 3 of those. And for young adult love stories, they are fantastic. I like them better than adult romances, to be totally honest. Yeah, I didn't feel like bringing all of those down, but I just wanted to showcase them in case you remember them from one of the other tours I did in the periphery. Hey, thanks so much for joining me on that tour. Hope you found a couple of interesting new titles to look into, and I hope to catch you next week. Bye.